Tick-tack, it's my clock telling me I should get up.
Hi, and welcome to The Conscious Loop, where woo-woo and the real world collide. I'm your host, Katrina DeAngelis. Join me as we explore what it looks like to live consciously almost always. Each episode, we dive into transforming mindsets and shifting paradigms through topics such as developing self-awareness, living authentically, communication, strengthening relationships, and leading from the inside out. If you're ready to break out of your unconscious loops and discover what else is possible, you came to the right place. You ready? Let's dive in. It is so good to have you on the first live recording in studio on the Conscious Loop. I'm so happy that you said that you were going to be in person and suggested to do this in person, because I think on topic of what we're going to dive into more today, I think you can just form, such a deeper connection in person. And there's so much you can do virtually as well, but there is something nice about being in the energy of another human in the space. So thank you for being here. And I'm excited to dive into today. Rather than having you introduce yourself, I wanted to share, I absolutely love, so for those of you who are listening, Lisa does a connection hour, and she recently did one here in LA, which was so fun, of course, but I always walk away just amazed at how much I learn and how deepening relationships is such a skill, because no matter how good I think I am, this is my ego now talking, no matter how, good I think I have developed that skill, I always walk away from even just conversations with you in amazement of how much deeper I can really go and how I can continue to build that skill. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about that event today as well, but I would love for you to just say hello and introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, hello. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here and to connect with you after the energy of the event, but also with everyone that's listening. And I really hope, my intention is that through our conversation that you learn, you grow in the process, you feel inspired, and that, you take at least a nugget that does move a relationship forward, and that you have a much more interesting and meaningful interaction with someone today.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's somebody that you're just meeting, someone you just hired, somebody you've always known, someone you've just met, these skills and tools can really be used in so many different ways. So before we dive in, I would love for you to share, what is a pivotal moment that you've actually gone through? Maybe an unconscious loop. I always love to ask this question of my guests, an unconscious loop that you have made conscious, and through that has been a transformative, pivotal moment in your life. And what has that pivot really made possible for you?
Just getting into the juice of it right away.
I learned from the best.
I love it. I am fully comfortable with that. I receive it well.
Yeah.
As you know, I love skipping the small talk, and I feel that the juice of life is about getting real and really getting into who someone is, what they care about, what their experiences are, those things that have shaped us, and to really learn, through those types of conversations in the process. So I welcome sharing about my experiences. And I think as I really feel into that, one of the moments that really stands out to me is actually a time in my former professional life and career. So before I became a connection alchemist and really a master human connections facilitator and conversation coach, in order to really have people create more abundance and fulfillment and joy, in their lives through more meaningful connections, I was a former marketing leader. And so there was a time in my past career in corporate life, building teams, creating emotional connection with consumers for 20 years, that I really kept my personal life and my professional life completely separate. And what I thought, based off of traditional constructs of society, was that if we shared these parts of ourselves outside of work, that it would hold us back within our careers. And in my desire to be climbing the corporate ladder and doing all the things just right, that I really protected these other parts of my life. And it was so strange, actually, as to like why I was doing that. I remember very distinctly one day that I would always say that I was going camping. And really, I was going to a very powerful transformational event, such as Burning Man. And I remember very distinctly, after years of hiding that my team finally asked me, like, are you going to Burning Man? And instead of me just saying I was camping in Nevada, I just paused. And I said to myself, I felt like all the energy running through me, like, yes, I am. And in that moment, what was fascinating to me was that the CEO at the time, he heard about this. He comes running up to me and he goes, I hear you're going to Burning Man. What's it about? And what was fascinating is that it didn't hold me back in my career. It actually moved it forward, because as people said, wow, I learned so much about you that I didn't understand and know. And it wasn't just the intensity of, the work, that they felt more comfortable sharing their personal lives. And in turn, they felt more comfortable voicing their opinions, their ideas, the challenges we were facing. And it led to such more of an open culture. They were more creative together. They were more collaborative together. And we actually, from that place, had stronger engagement, and we moved the business forward. So I never went back to not sharing parts of who I am as an authentic human. And of course, there's boundaries of that within a professional environment, but definitely realizing that when we show up fully as we are, we create authentic connection, and that sometimes building a strong, trusted business relationship, one of the fastest ways you can do that is also building a personal relationship. And so now I feel like they're all interconnected, and our lives are really interconnected, both personally and professionally.
Wow. So powerful, because it's so interesting. Like, I know for myself, and I've seen this with the people I work with too, it's like I hold back because of fear of judgment, right? Like, how is somebody going to perceive this? Are they going to make assumptions about me or judgments about me because of this one thing? And oftentimes it's those things that are your unique factor that people become really curious about. And it's that opportunity to connect. And so I love that you had that so early, not maybe so early on, but I would imagine that it was early on in this version of you where you're now doing this work because you saw the transformative power of it. And so what are some common themes when you think about people that you work with, maybe your private clients or even just from events, the questions that people ask? What are some common unconscious loops that you see people having, those breakthrough moments that do tend to change it all, or at least lead to that next level for people that they've unlocked within themselves?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because there's so many unconscious loops, and it holds us back from the types of connections that we desire. Yeah. And it also holds us back from how we feel comfortable and confident. And so what I love is within the work, and many people have shared this with me, is that what they were most surprised about was the self-awareness that they gained in the process, and then learning the skill and the art of conversation and connection. And so what I can say is that a lot of times people are first really in their own mind and their own story around, what is someone going to think about me? Am I interesting? Am I interesting enough to talk to this person? And then there's this sense of worthiness, or lack thereof that comes up. So that's a really, really big block for people. And it holds them back from interacting in various different ways. There's also this other sense of, is it okay to ask something that is a little bit more emotionally connected or personal? Like, can I really ask them that? Don't you get strange looks when you ask people those questions? And so it holds them back from actually engaging in this way that is proven to accelerate human connection.
Yeah. And what do you think? So what's the trick? And I'm sure, everyone's looking for that sort of like magic thing, and it's never just this one magic thing, but what tends to get people through that? Is it a mindset shift? Is it, something that happens in the dialogue, in the conversation? Like what tends to support people in shifting that perspective? Because I also feel like that could, a lot of the times it's a projection, right? We were talking about earlier about the projection versus managing the relationship. And I know I've done that for sure, where I'm projecting onto somebody that they're going to look at me funny or think I'm weird, or maybe I think I'm weird. Like I'm still trying to figure it out. Right. And I feel a little bit uncomfortable. So yeah, how do you recommend that people manage that are in that sort of headspace right now and are wanting to ask a deeper question, but are scared that they might get a weird look?
Yeah. I mean, first I'd say like, so what? And like, really, like for a moment, just take that in. Like, so what?
Mm-hmm.
What's the worst that can happen?
It's funny because now when I think about that question, I'm like, yeah, you're right. So what? Like, I actually love when I get funny looks, like, because it sort of confirms to me that I'm on track in a way. Like, I don't know, like if somebody kind of like pauses and is like, wow, what a question. Now I sort of take it as confirmation that I'm also stretching out of my comfort zone and stretching somebody outside of their comfort zone. But so what? Who cares?
Aren't we all weird in our own ways? Isn't that what makes us, beautiful and interesting? Like we all have our own experiences, idiosyncrasies, and that is really powerful. And so it's great feeling that you are weird, like, but yet there's a way you can feel like you have a sense of belonging wherever you are. Wherever you are, no matter what the situation is. What I find is that it's so important to not get stuck in that story and really focus much more on what's the benefit versus the risk. Like what's the benefit? How do I feel after I've connected with someone, when you've had this interaction and it's so rich and it's so juicy and you can't wait to continue to be in engagement with that person. And that could be whether you're talking to, someone at work and it's a colleague, or whether it's a client or potential client, whether it's a friend or a stranger on the street, like whatever it is, we all have these different moments where that can be unlocked. And so what I would say is it's about first, really focusing your energy and intention on how does it feel after I've had that connection? And when you get excited about that versus any fear that's holding you back, you're going to be much more likely to then engage in those ways. And I know from my own personal experience that it is part mindset and it's part skill. I used to go into different professional events or social gatherings, even, remembering like years ago back in grad school and feeling like, oh, there's all these networking events you're going to, and it felt so awkward and uncomfortable. Like, what am I going to say to someone that's going to make them feel like they want to help me in moving an opportunity forward, right? And I realized like, it's so not about that. It's about actually just focusing on how can I be curious about this person? How can I actually learn about something of who they are that I'm going to learn in any single dialogue? And that is what is interesting. So the mindset that I would say is you have to cultivate a genuinely curious mindset. Dale Carnegie, he always talks about be interested, not interesting. And that is so incredibly critical. So I would say that the three things that I always tell people are: one, believe that every conversation could be interesting. The second thing is like, I care most about being interested, not interesting. And then the third thing is, that I care most about really being in service and contributing to the conversation, not about seeking someone's approval. And if you really, really can embody those mindsets, it's game changing in how you actually show up. And then, of course, it's the skill of how you're asking the question that's going to unlock a much, much different conversation.
Yeah. And I would love to dive into that a little bit. So it's like, first, there's the mindset of preparing yourself to go into the conversation, some of the mindset shifts that might need to happen. And there's intention and context that I feel like probably play a role as well. So I'm curious, how do you determine your intention and context, whether it's like maybe with a colleague or going to an event and you want to build relationships? Because that I feel like is going to guide the questions in some way. So there's the intention and the context, and then the how, right? Like, what are some tips for people to accelerate their connection?
Yeah. Such an important question. I was recently talking to a private client about this because she's going to a lot of different types of events, particularly conferences and professional events, and also, certainly social gatherings as well. But in the professional context, recognizing that she just kind of typically go in and, just have typical conversation, right? And what ends up happening when you're not intentional is you get stuck in the surface level small talk, and you're like, oh, how are you? What's going on? What do you do? And when that happens, you feel the energy completely get sucked out of the conversation in the room, right? And most people, either will be in a conversation for a period of time, and then they'll kind of be like, great, I'm going to go to the bathroom, or I'm going to go grab a drink, see ya. And that's why it ends up being so transactional, right? It's like, oh, I didn't get anything from that conversation, but it's not. It's so not about that. So what we were working on was for these specific types of situations, like, what is your true intention? Like, what would you desire most? And cultivating that for these specific situations. And what she found is that she's really tuned into that not only was thinking about the intention of what is it that she would love to learn? What is it that she'd love to feel? Then she could cultivate what I call 3 back pocket questions. And so if you have the 3 questions that you can think of before you're walking into an event, so that that you have the mindset of, I'm going to be interested in this person. I'm going to focus on one person at a time, one person at a time. It's not about everyone in the room. And then you have 3 back pocket questions that you're kind of thinking about. It's going to really help you that it could be flexible. You don't have to ask them, but you're going to be much more intentional about what you ask then. So you have to shift the dynamic of, instead of asking like, what do you do? Like, you have to ask it in a way that's going to bring out something that's much more interesting faster for the other person to be able to share. For example, I always like common reframes of questions. So I never ask those questions anymore. Like, it's literally not part of my vocabulary, but I will ask something similar. Instead of asking, what do you do? I'll ask, like, what inspires you to do what you do? What inspires you? You get so much more of the juice of what matters to them and why. And so that's just like one example. And then there's other ways that I kind of cultivate like the 3 back pocket questions as well. Yeah.
And I almost feel like called to answer that as an example, to just show people the difference. Like, if you were to just ask me, what do you do? I'm a coach. Yeah. Consultant, work with companies.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so it makes me kind of curious, like, what inspired you to do what you do?
I just absolutely love helping people work towards their full potential and unlock parts of themselves that they never knew was there, or rediscover parts of themselves that were always there, so that they can feel their best, they can be authentic, and they can create lasting impact and change that's sustainable and a part of an expression of who they are. So yeah, that's why I love what I do.
I can see you got like so lit up, like literally, like I'm like feeling the smile on your face that you care so deeply about really just helping people thrive and realize their full potential, and doing that so that it's really sustainable in their lives and their businesses. And I'm curious, like, what inspired you, like, personally around that? How did you get to that?
Yeah, I've tried to trace this back as long as I could go. And I've just always been very, very interested in human behavior and motivation, like why we do what we do. I think like my brain, that's just the way that it works. And so in elementary school and high school, I wanted to be a therapist. But then I sort of like saw that there was this whole other space, or not necessarily a whole other space, but I'd hear my parents come home from work, and I'd hear other sort of adults at the time complain about their job. And I always thought it was so sad that people spent so much time at work and didn't like it and like it wasn't fueling them. And so I think that was the moment for me when I realized I really want to help people enjoy where they spend most of their time because it is at work. And it was fueled by just my curiosity as a young girl of human behavior and sort of like how the mind works. Like I always just was really deeply curious about that. So yeah. And I just want to share too, like for the audience who's listening, when you ask me those questions, you're giving me a gift of that reflection because sometimes people don't get the opportunity to reflect on those questions. So, you know, oftentimes when we are in conversations, it can feel like, oh, you know, you're looking to get something and, you know, you want to meet people and there's this outcome that you're looking for. Well, what am I giving to them? Right. I hear that a lot. Like people overthink well, what am I giving them? I feel bad asking for something, but not giving something. But you just asking me that question was a gift because I got to reflect on that myself. I got to formulate the answer and it got me excited and it gave me energy. And so I just want to share that with the audience too, like the power of a question.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And there's a entrepreneur, Adam Rifke, that I always loved what he said is just, you can give someone a 5-minute favor. And it's such a simple concept, but I always really resonated with that. And for me, what I personally believe you can give as a 5-minute favor is you can always give someone feedback. It's such a gift. You can always make a connection for someone that moves something forward for them. And the third is you can just deeply listen. And, you know, most people think that they're great listeners, but truly they're not really listening and listening beyond the words of what someone is saying. And that is where you really are tuning into what they're sharing. And you have to, in order to be also a great listener, you have to ask the better questions in a way that's going to unlock it and bring the best out, you know, from someone so that they can share in a way that is going to then be more engaging and interesting. And, you know, if you're not asking the question and framing it in a way that's going to unlock more of their whys or what they've learned or what their experiences are, then you're not going to be able to bring out the best in them. So that's why, I mean, I have like proprietary frameworks and like how to actually ask better questions, like in order to unlock it. But the key is also to stay curious. So that's where the listening comes in. Like what, if you're listening and you've kind of noticed and tuning into it, you know, most people just will ask one question and then they'll quickly move on or they'll change topics. They won't stay with it. So my invitation for you is to at least ask one more question. You know, I asked you again, like the next level of deeper, like, well, what then inspired you personally, right? First, it was like, what inspired you? And then it was what inspired you personally. And by asking one more question, I totally learned so much more about you. And I felt here as the listener, I felt totally more emotionally connected to you. So you have to stay with it.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Like always going sort of one level deeper, one question further, and teasing out that like you're building a deeper relationship. And I know in part 2, we're going to go into deepening relationships, which I'm so excited about. I know you have so many tips. So I want to sort of contextualize this maybe in the accelerating the relationship piece. What are some more tips? You just gave one really amazing one. It was, you know, always asking one more question. And also you mentioned reframing typical questions. So rather than what do, you know, what inspires you to do what you do? Simple reframe that you're going to get such a more energized answer. What are some other tips that people can use to accelerate relationships that will really help set us up for our next conversation on deepening those relationships?
Okay. Well, I do think that, you know, as we're talking about questions and the power of questions, because it's one of the things that I am beyond passionate about. And there's so much research around this, particularly one by Harvard Business Review that really said the unique power of questions that accelerates the quality of our relationships and meaningful connection. And so there's an appropriate level of cadence, you know, of how we ask our questions. But I believe that when you ask more what questions, that helps you actually learn more about people's experiences. So if you are, you know, in a professional event or a gathering, and we talked about the 3 back pocket questions. Some of the things that you can ask is, first, just what inspired you to come to this event? The second might be, what's something that's energizing you right now in your business or your life? And the third might be, what is something that you're focusing on moving forward? And those 3 questions are so important because, one, it's helping you actually very quickly establish common ground, why you both are there. The second is, what's energizing you is helping you actually create more positive energy. When you first meet someone, the energy between you and that person is one of the most powerful things of what attracts you to that person. So it's going to accelerate your connection if you are actually inquiring in a way that's going to uplift their energy. And then the third is, what's something you're focused on moving forward. When you actually learn about what someone cares about and you acknowledge that and appreciate it, and then maybe even championing it, it's going to completely accelerate your connection. So that's why you'd ask those types of questions. And then if you're so inclined to take it the next step forward, nurturing a relationship is also about support. And so you might then ask them, what are they most challenged by in moving that forward, and what support might be helpful for them? So that then in the moment, you might be able to then say, oh, you could offer a reflection and it helps them be enlightened about something. Or you might actually make a connection for them that's going to move that forward. And you can actually be in service to that person, or you can offer a resource that they can, dive into and listen to or read that's going to really, really help them. So that's where I feel like nurturing our relationships to start to then get closer to someone is really about learning about who they are, what they really care about on an authentic level. And then, really being open, being vulnerable, being compassionate, being curious, being really present, and then really helping champion them.
Yeah. I love that championing them. Wow. Can't say that word, championing. I really like that because, again, there's always these ways that you can add value that you might not realize until you're in conversation, whether it's even talking about a book or sharing a resource or sharing something that might inspire them. These are all little ways that you can add value. And it's interesting because as you share, you didn't mention anything about building relatability or finding common ground or similarities. And I think that's really important to unpack because I think it's common advice, but that sort of gets you stuck in this small talk. And then it sort of, I feel anyways, this is like maybe just my own opinion, but it can limit you in so many ways because you're looking for something that's like similar to you versus just being deeply curious about another person. Can you maybe talk, a little bit to that and how that plays a role and maybe debunk the myth around finding that similarity?
I think that it's such a powerful observation because so often we have a lot of preconceived notions, biases, and assumptions that get in the way. And so we are judging people very fast. And I have seen, my own life really cultivating the skill of releasing the judgment of how many doors that it's opened, how many enriching interactions that I've had, how many greater relationships, I've also had. And I find that, we want people that also have similar values, but also that have different experiences. Like that's so important for the diversity of thought, especially, within a professional context too. And so if you're asking a question in a way that is already going to have an inferred bias around it, you're never going to have someone actually respond in a way that is going to be open. So you're not creating a very safe space, and it's going to shut someone down. So it's going to completely become a connection tractor. So I find that there's really a lot of ways that if you start to not try to move so fast and you're like a little bit more patient, then that's how you can start to form these relationships that will really open up. So for example, I was working with one client and she used to really dismiss people a lot. And she didn't even realize that she was doing it, honestly. And so through our work, she gained this greater awareness. And as she then started to actually slow down, she would respond in a way that was more thoughtful of acknowledging what they said instead of just quickly turning the subject to something else. Actually trying to get a better understanding of their experiences and what they cared about, and being that they were different than hers. What she noticed was like, wow, there's so many things that we actually have in common in what we believe in and what we're actually trying to make impact on. And what it helped her do was it helped her get more social invitations. It helped her move into greater collaborations. It helped her expand her business and have next level of clients. Like, all these things started to unlock to her. And it also started to deepen the intimacy within her romantic relationships. So much is possible when you actually just like tune into the nuance of the skill around it and truly learn not to have that judgment.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like we could do a whole podcast on the like suspending judgment, and diversity of perspective is so important. But I love how just that one simple shift can really transform the relationship and the questions that she or he ask in that moment. And I want to even dive into the dismissive piece, but maybe we can save that for deepening conversations, because I think, you know, those subtle things that we don't realize we're doing often are the things that I find anyways prevent the relationship from deepening. And often I don't even know they're happening, or the other person might not know they're happening. And it brings up sort of, it can bring up stuff for either person in that relationship when it comes to the deepening. But this has been unbelievable, because accelerating relationships is already deepening, right? Like, you're already going so much deeper than you would by meeting someone and just being like, hey, how's your day? Like, all the small talk. So it is accelerating and deepening. And so is there anything before, you know, we dive into the deepening relationships that you want to leave people with here?
I think what I would leave is like to really just be brave and courageous and skip the small talk. And maybe it's go beyond the small talk. You know, you have to have an appropriate cadence in it. But what I have found, you know, particularly with participants that have been part of my online group program called the Connection Accelerator, where you learn my methodology on how to actually do this in any situation and an interaction, that, you know, recently one had gone to an event, and she prompted, you know, a question that she had learned from me. And it's not just the question, it's how you ask it. It's how you're tuning into the context and what you say to express your intent around it, how you frame it up that immediately creates the safety and the intrigue, right? For someone to receive that. What she said was that at the end of that event, that person came up to her and said, that was the best conversation I had all night. It was in 10 minutes that they had that conversation. It was the most memorable. Can we please exchange our contact information? I would love to stay connected. And then they went on to form a very supportive professional relationship and friendship. And so again, my invitation for you is to this week, just try to not ask, how are you? What do you do? And really ask a more powerful question, and to practice the three things that we really talked about today, which is 1, asking better questions, 2, more mindfully listening, and 3, telling better stories in order to accelerate more meaningful and authentic connection.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom with the group and with everyone who's here listening and who will listen to this. And I invite people, share with us what you have learned. How did a question that you asked change the dynamic of a relationship, maybe change a relationship with a team member? You'll have Lisa's contact in the show notes as well. So please reach out to her and let her know how her questions have really helped transform some of your conversations. And we'll see you in part 2.
Like what you heard and want more? Stay connected with our community on social media using the links below. Like us on your favorite podcast provider and sign up for the Conscious Loop newsletter, where we only send you goodies with one intent: to break your unconscious loops. If you have an unconscious loop you want to break free from, let us know so we can feature that loop on the show. Info and show notes, and we'll see you next time in the Conscious Loop.